On Tech News Today, Motorola updates their mobile gadgets, plus Apple promises better iCloud security, but is it enough? And Twitter users are complaining again. All that and more coming up right now on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Friday, September 5th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by Personal Capital. With Personal Capital, you'll finally have all your financial life in one place and get a clear view of everything you own. Best of all, it's free. To sign up, go to personalcapital.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan, and right over there is Jason Howell.
Hey,
the one and only Jason Howell, who's
right over here.
Who's, if he looks disappointed, it's because he saw the report by Joanna Stern in the Wall Street Journal about the Moto 360 battery life, which she said had to be charged twice a day.
Not just Joanna Stern, but also The Verge and a few other publications. Thankfully, there are some positive reviews about the battery life, but I'm skeptical at this point. I'm hoping that it's better than less than a day, because that's unacceptable for a watch.
The charger looks cool, though. The charger looks great. It's like this little slanted thing, and you just throw the watch on it and walk away. And that is really great. And it has some other features as well, which we'll get into in this show. Also joining us is our guest co-anchor, Christina Warren. Welcome, Christina Warren.
Hey there.
Are you excited about the Apple announcement Tuesday?
Oh, man, I can't wait. I won't be there in person, but Mashable will have 3 people there, and we're super excited. We'll be covering things from the live stream, which it's great that they pre-announced that. And, you know, bring on the iWatch, bring on the bigger iPhones, bring on the super giant iPhone. Bring it all on. I'm ready.
Yeah, me too. And, you know, I wrote a piece for Saturday publication that talks about how right now everybody's calling it the, quote, iPhone announcement. And I think that in the future they will refer to it as the iWatch announcement. I think iWatch is going to steal the show because this is another example of Apple launching a new platform that I think is going to be super influential. They did it with the Mac. They did it with the iPod. They did it with the iPhone and iPad. And I think this is the 5th one. And I think, you know, a year from now, the latest iPhone will be pretty much irrelevant, and the iWatch will be the story of the day. So we'll see what happens there. And, of course, our coverage of Apple's live event begins at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesday. This show, Tech News Today, is going to start at 9 o'clock a.m., so we're going to do a 30-minute show and go straight into our Apple coverage. So make sure you don't miss that. Well, what do you think, Christina? Should we do the news?
We should do the news.
All right, let's do it. Motorola yesterday announced several products that update the company's mobile lineup. These include improvements to the Moto X and Moto G smartphone lines and the official rollout of the Moto 360 smartwatch. They even had a couple of surprises for us. Kevin Fitchard writes for GigaOM and joins us now. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Now, what was the biggest news, in your opinion, that came out of the whole Motorola announcement?
That's a little bit difficult to say because they kind of gave it all away beforehand. Even the media invites had a picture of every single device that was on there, even if there wasn't a detailed explanation of what everything was. I mean, I think the thing that everybody was anticipating was probably going to be the Moto 360. And it, I mean, of the 3 devices that were, 3 devices, yes, that were kind of unveiled at Google I/O, it was kind of the one that drew the most, I guess, accolades. And I mean, I played with it myself, got a demo unit, was able to look at it, and it was actually pretty impressive what it was, though, as you kind of pointed out earlier, if it is a watch you do have to charge twice a day, it's going to be a lot less useful. So, but I mean, to your point, though, it is actually a lot easier watch to charge in that it just sits in this little crown station. It almost looks like something that you would put in a display case in an apartment store. It just basically the face of the watch just rests on top of it.
So you rest your watch in a charger because you can't keep it on your wrist because it won't stay charged. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So, yeah. And it only comes with one charger. So if your watch dies and you're right in the middle of work, the charger that you have at home isn't exactly going to do you that much good. So.
But they announced some phones too, right? So yes. They're bigger. That's the big thing, correct? The Moto, I mean, that's one of the big things, right? The Moto X is going from 4.7 to how big is it now?
5.2 inches, I believe.
Yeah, it's 5.2 inches. Yep.
And then 5 inches for the G. So they're definitely wider phones, larger phones, and they have higher resolution. the Moto X is going to be full HD 1080p and have a bigger pixel density. Even though the phones are, I mean, they are larger. The feel in the hand isn't actually that much larger. At least not the impression that I got. They actually thinned out the edges and increased the size of like the sloping bevel in the back, so it's easier to wrap your hand around it. And I had I get complaints from a lot of people I know, especially people with smaller hands, that these new large phones can't be used one-handed. And I don't know, maybe I just have big, meaty hands. I had no issue taking my thumb and connecting my forefinger without stretching across the face of the device.
I think the biggest thing, of course, is that they now have a leather option for leather enthusiasts. You know who you are. But generally speaking, a Moto X is one of the rare phones that came out right out of the gate. The very 1.0 version of the Moto X was really great. And so this is a refinement of that. It's like you said, it's bigger, it's higher resolution, went from 720p to full HD, which is really welcome. Hopefully the camera is a lot better. It has some interesting interface elements, one of which is the new touchless interface supports custom wake-up commands. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Moto X uses basically a kind of background wake-up sensor that is always listening for voice commands. So there's no touch necessary to activate the device. And they actually, they put in some custom commands, so you don't have to use the OK Google command necessarily to wake up the phone. You could say, hey, Shirley, or I think Motorola gave an example of someone who did talk to me, Goose, as their wake-up command. And then from there, you can go directly into initiating, I guess, several voice functions, including making a Facebook post, answering a phone call, a text message, all that thing directly from, without touching your phone, directly from that kind of wake-up prompt with your voice. And they also did some stuff with, I'm not sure if you're about to get into this, Mike, but with the IR sensors that allow you to basically interact with the phone much more just by waving your hand over it, whether it's to silence a phone call or to basically, or to get, information on your most recent notifications while in a meeting without actually having to touch it or wake it up.
It's kind of like a Jedi mind trick. The thing is ringing and you sort of wave your hand over it and say, those aren't the droids you're looking for. And it goes silent, right? That's one of the gestures.
Yes.
And it's really, I think it's really cool. And it's, for those of us who love the Moto X, this will be a welcome phone. Now, I had trouble with the screen on my Moto X. It got really scratched up and then a minor drop shattered it. And then there were some people who were reporting that they were able to get a free replacement. They turned me down for that. And so the screen was a problem. I hope they have a harder screen that doesn't scratch as well. But if I do end up with this phone, I'm definitely going to put a protector on it just in case, because I got burned on the last one. Now, to me, the most interesting announcement was the Moto Hint. Can you tell us about the Moto Hint?
That was probably, if there was kind of something that wasn't given away ahead of time, it was the Hint. It's basically a Bluetooth headset, but it's Motorola's kind of very interesting take on a Bluetooth headset. While it's not a traditional wearable, it doesn't have an operating system or anything like that. It actually has a lot more smarts than your typical earbud. It has sensors in it. It has capacitive touch sensors. It has IR sensors, and it's basically intelligent enough to know when it's in your ear and how it can communicate information. I had a little bit of trouble getting details out of Motorola from this, but they actually showed a demo in which where it could communicate. Because it actually, first let me start over. It actually has the same kind of ambient listening technology in the earbud that the Moto X actually has in it, so it can be woken up just the same way with your voice, just the same way the phone was. But essentially, it's channeling all of its Google Now commands into the phone interface, just like it would through a regular app. But it's also smart enough to know whether or not how to give information. So one of the demos they gave was asking through the Hint what the score was for a recent Cubs game. And instead of displaying the actual score on the phone, since it knows it's in your pocket and the Hint is in your ear, it actually read out the score to it, knowing that was the mode that you were looking for. So it was an impressive little device. It's awfully expensive, $150. But it definitely has many more features than you would consider for a dumb headset. So.
Yeah, so the Hint is really interesting, and it kind of seems to me, and it's taking the Google Now approach that we saw with Glass, and we saw with the Moto X, and we've seen with Android Wear. Do you think once Motorola is no longer any way affiliated with Google, that it will continue to invest in these sorts of areas, or did you get the sense that maybe this a Google Hint, or this Moto Hint rather, is maybe a one-off product, and that if it does okay, great, but it's more just something that they had cooking in the labs?
I don't know. I mean, that's a very good question because, I mean, I'm sure if the hint does very, very well, it will continue on the line. But I mean, I see people using headsets less and less these days. And I mean, I see people talking on the phone less and less these days. So, I mean, I just don't know how big of a model it could prove to be. I mean, they're kind of billing it as this device that you wear all day long. And while they say it's unnoticeable, it's still very noticeable. It looks like a big hearing aid, but it just doesn't look like that kind of top bar that goes off the side of your head, that you walk around in. But I mean, once Lenovo happens, anything could happen. I mean, it could prove to be, a very popular peripheral. I mean, it's not Android Wear. It's not. All it is basically is an extension of your phone, just a smarter one. And I could imagine, I could imagine it doing very well for them. But I don't know whether or not this is like key to them tying into Google Voice Commands and Google Now.
I think, if anything, the problem with this product is that it's unlikely to fit everyone. Some people it'll be too big. Others will be too small. People have variation in their ears. I personally have trouble keeping the Apple earbuds in my ears when I'm running and stuff like that. They just come out. But I also think that they're onto something really powerful here. Whether this particular product succeeds or fails, I think that this is really the future of all computing, which is going to be like Star Trek, where you talk to the room and the microphone is somewhere. It's either embedded in the objects in your house or your car or whatever, or it's on you somewhere, either in your glasses or on your coat or in your ear. But one way or the other, we're going to be interacting a lot more with computers by talking, and they're going to be talking back to us, and that's the interface. I call it hearable computing. I probably didn't invent that. I'm sure somebody called it that before I did. But I've written about this, and this is really, I think, one of the most compelling wearable computing platforms, which is hearable, where the whole interface is audio, and it's mostly about the spoken language between you and your virtual assistant. Of course, Siri is going to be improved. Google Now is going to be improved. Cortana is huge, and others are going to be coming out with these virtual assistants, which will become much more powerful, much more intelligent, much more contextual, and it's going to be way better to just simply interact with our devices by talking. And so I think they're really onto something here, and they have the right technology with the Wake It Up with a command sort of technology, and also interacting with Google Now and with all of the technology in the Moto X. So I think it's really cool. I just don't know if this particular, it looks kind of cheesy, it looks kind of bulky. It has this kind of fabric or wood grain on it, which I think is completely unnecessary. I mean, make it invisible, make it disappear into the ear. And I think that's a compelling user interface. Well, Kevin Fitchard is at gigaohm.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at kfitchard. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kevin.
Thank you for having me.
All right, in just a sec, we're going to tell you about what's happening with the big crisis with the downloaded photos from iCloud and elsewhere. But first, I want to tell you about Personal Capital. We're talking about the wearable computing movement. Personal Capital has a wearable computing app for Android Wear, currently the leading platform for wearable devices, and it will put your financial information right on your wrist. But let's talk about Personal Capital generally. What can Personal Capital do for you? They can help you hang on to more of your money and make better investment decisions, and they do that by bringing together all of your financial information into one intuitive graph and chart, one view of everything that is going on with your money, and you can look at that on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop, your desktop, whatever, or all of the above, including your watch. And it's just really a fantastic way to get an intuitive sense. You have to understand what's happening with your money. You won't be able to get that picture if you're looking at these different accounts all over the place. The other thing that Personal Capital can do is help you save money on the fees you're paying. You're probably overpaying in fees, and Personal Capital will show you how to reduce them all, and also you can get tailored advice on optimizing your investment. So set up a free account. Go to personalcapital.com/TNT. And remember that Personal Capital is free, and it's a smart way to grow your money, and we thank Personal Capital for their support of Tech News Today. Apple CEO Tim Cook told the Wall Street Journal yesterday that Apple plans to improve iCloud security. Cook's promise comes after the private photos of more than 100 women celebrities were stolen and posted online over the weekend. Danny Yadron is a cybersecurity reporter for the Wall Street Journal and contributed to this exclusive. Welcome to you, Danny Yadron.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So what did Cook promise as Apple's fix for iCloud?
Well, the only technical change he told our reporter about is that users will get a push notification if someone is changing your password for an iCloud backup. And in theory, that would give you a heads up if someone is accessing your personal photos or other types of sensitive data that you don't want them to.
Now, so in addition to the material things, Cook also had a message for the idea. He basically said that, yes, to a certain extent, there are things we can do, but we also, the user is also a problem here. And he said it in terms of we need to remember to remind people. We're going to do a better job of reminding people to use two-step authentication and also to use better passwords, all that kind of stuff. But really, he's putting the blame on the users here to a certain extent, isn't he?
Well, he definitely, there are people after these revelations came out who said, not just Apple, but all large tech companies need to do more to basically, protect users from themselves. You sort of assume, people are going to put, sensitive, intimate pictures on these devices or things like that. And, Tim Cook's message was, no, not at a technical level, there's not much we can change or will change. As you just said, he said we need to do more to educate users. If we've come up short anywhere, it's there. And, this is a really sensitive time for Apple when it comes to personal data. As you were talking about earlier, they're going to announce a whole bunch of new devices next week, which will rely on, collecting a lot more health data from consumers. And you're not going to get people to use that unless they feel comfortable handing that data over to Apple devices.
Now, Tim also mentioned, I believe, something about making two-factor verification better. What can you tell us about that, and what did he have to say about how, because Apple, right now, one of the criticisms Apple's facing, and I think this is a correct criticism, is that their implementation of two-factor verification is both cumbersome to set up and not that effective. So what did he have to say in regards to how Apple's going to be looking at how it uses two-factor verification?
Well, one of the biggest criticisms Apple has faced right now is two-factor authentication actually doesn't apply in a lot of places. Researchers were looking at it and found it only kicks in, assuming you signed up for it, if you are managing your account, you're purchasing something from a new device, or when you get your Apple ID. And so even if the celebrities in question had two-factor set up, it wouldn't have kicked in this instance. And it's unclear if Apple is going to change any of those settings for iCloud backups.
I think part of the problem is that there are so many entry points into Apple's world of data, and these are kind of complicated in terms of what's happening. I don't think your average actor or actress is going to really understand what's cached, what's held on to for 30 days, what's in the cloud, what's local, and so on. And so a lot of this is about simplicity, and this has been a criticism of iCloud since the beginning. Now, Cook correctly points out that the Apple servers themselves were not actually compromised, that nothing was really downloaded from Apple servers. These were, social engineering hacks for the most part. But let's face it, iCloud is too complicated, I think, for the average user, especially when you compare it against much simpler offerings like Dropbox. And I know the security purists will always say, no, those iCloud and Dropbox are completely different things. But I think that the Dropbox model, the very, the sort of Google Drive model, very simple, very straightforward, may be preferable from a user understanding point of view than the highly complex iCloud. What do you think about that?
Well, there is always a trade-off between simplicity and security. And, even if you talk to security researchers, Chris Soghoian at ACLU, Ashkan Soltani, who's doing a lot of work with the Washington Post these days, they say Apple does actually a pretty good job of protecting your average consumer, but there's a lot of, it has a very porous security setup when it comes to blocking someone who's really determined to get your information. Sort of the key to Apple security right now is, password backup questions, such as, who was your high school mascot, or, things like that. If you're a celebrity, it's probably pretty easy to figure that stuff out. Even if you're not a celebrity, a lot of that stuff is just on the internet these days. At the same time, pardon me, it's not clear where Apple has its settings right now for letting people to repeatedly try guessing someone's password or the answer to a security question. And that leaves open a pretty big window for hackers.
Well, it's an interesting point. It was a great article. Danny Yadron writes at WSJ.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Danny Yadron. Thank you so much for joining us again, Danny.
Thank you.
Well, Christina Warren, you wrote a really interesting piece published yesterday on the Mashable site called How I Hacked My Own iCloud Account for Just $200. Great piece. So how did you hack your own iCloud account?
Yeah, so shockingly, it was remarkably simple. So the first thing that I did, and I want to point this out, that there were a couple of specifics involved with hacking my account. One thing was I did have two-factor verification turned on, but for my particular account, I chose a purposefully bad password. And I didn't use the iRoot tool, but I used something similar, and I was able to brute force and get the password cracked. Once I was able to uncover the password, there is a $200 program called EPPB. It's Elcomsoft Phone Password Breaker. And I bought that program. It's a Windows program. Entered in my iCloud email address and my password, and was instantly given the ability to download all of my iCloud backups from my phone or my tablet. They also have a method where if you don't have access to someone's password, but if you can get physical access to their computer and they're logged into iCloud through the iCloud control settings, they can grab an authentication token and you can get backups that way. So, even with two-factor authentication on, I was able to download my iCloud backups from the cloud without any sort of prompt, any sort of notification whatsoever. And I was also able to hack into my sister's iCloud account. And what was interesting about that is for that one, I just used the simple password reset question, which if you have two-factor authentication turned on, you can't get access to, but most people don't have that on. So I just went through her different password questions. And what was interesting was that, first enter in the birthday, which for most people who are, and I think I should point out, my opinion is that most regular people who might be at risk of being hacked, the people who are going to hack you are not going to be strangers, but people you know, which means it's very likely that they will probably have the ability to get your birth date. And that's the first vector. So first you need an email address, then you need a birth date, then you get these two questions. And with my sister's account, I knew the answer to one question, I didn't know the answer to another. So I just hit refresh. And I was able to continue to hit refresh until I got a combination of questions I knew the answer to. I wasn't ever prompted to re-sign in. I was just able to hit refresh kind of, at infinity, I guess, found two questions I could answer, entered them in, and then I could reset her password. And at that point, go about downloading anything that I would have wanted to. I didn't, but it was remarkably simple to do. So, but there's the tools out there that are very easy to use, that are disarmingly inexpensive in comparison to what most forensic tools cost. There's $200. There are cracked copies all over the place, and there are people who are doing these types of rips for individuals that aren't celebrities. They're putting in requests, hey, can you get my girlfriend's, iCloud? Can you get, my wife, my ex, this girl that I like in class? There are these, kind of this whole underground movement set up for people who are doing these sorts of rip requests. And because the software is inexpensive, easily accessible, and very easy to use, and because two-factor doesn't stop you from downloading a iCloud backup because of how the stuff has been reverse engineered, it's kind of frightening with how easy you can do it with a little bit of effort.
Well, first of all, it was really nice of you to hack your own account and not somebody else's. So on behalf of everyone else, thank you for that. And secondly, what would Apple do that could stop people like you from hacking into accounts and using these inexpensive tools? What could they do?
Well, I think the first thing would be to make two-factor verification actually work and be a requirement before you can download a backup copy of, your device content. I understand there might be some, weirdness with that if you're trying to do a device restore, but there should be some sort of check involved where you have to do something more than just enter in a password to download all of your device data. Because clearly this has been something that people have pointed out for a long time, that their two-factor verification protects your payment data, not your private data. So I think that's the first thing. Make the two-factor verification actually protect your data, because most people don't think that it's just protecting their payment information. They think it protects other things. I think the next step is obviously making it harder for people to attack these password questions. You shouldn't be able to just hit refresh and continue to get other answers come up. It should be one of those things where if you hit refresh, you should have to log in all over again, because each summary attempt, if you have too many, it blocks you out. You know, there should be some sort of something in place to prevent people from abusing this. It's also remarkably easy to find out if someone's email address is connected to an Apple ID. You can just run a simple, you know, HTTP, you know, command and find out if it's true or false. And they should, you know, fix that sort of thing. That shouldn't be possible. So there's a lot of little things they could do that wouldn't maybe mitigate all the social engineering that's going to happen, because that's just a fact of life, but would certainly make it more difficult and would certainly make the role that these inexpensive tools play less likely.
Now, you said you were able to download your iCloud stuff. What are we talking about here? Are you talking, did that data include Time Machine backups?
No, it didn't include Time Machine backups because that's not backed up to iCloud. But what it means is basically it would be the exact same thing as if I did an iTunes backup of my phone or iPad. The difference is it's not encrypted. The keychain file, which has your passwords, that's encrypted, but everything else, my camera roll, my email messages, application data, videos, you know, saved messages, SMS, call logs, all of that stuff is completely accessible. So basically you get a copy of your entire phone. I mean, on the one hand, from a forensic standpoint, it's sort of useful. I kind of actually have, for a long time, wanted the ability to maybe have my own backup of an iPhone backup. But on the other hand, I don't like that it was so easy to do over the cloud through this third-party reverse engineered tool that didn't even take into consideration that I have two-factor verification turned on. But no, I mean, your data from your Mac is not going to iCloud, at least not yet. But the way that these backups work is it's basically the exact same structure, the exact same contents as if you were to do an iTunes backup of your iPod or your iPhone or your iPad, only without any sort of encryption.
Interesting. One other thing that I think that they could do is something that Google does, which is that it pays attention to where you are. So if your iPhone tells Apple that you're in Cupertino and somebody tries to download your iCloud content from North Korea, it kind of says, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. And that would be a really great thing. Well, it was a great story and a great project and a great publicity stunt. Let's face it, this is a way to get attention and bring attention to this issue, because everybody needs to understand that Tim Cook's comments and promises notwithstanding, this is a real potential problem because so many people are using iCloud. Apple really pushes iCloud on people, but then they don't really push two-factor authentication on people. So that is not a good combination for the future of Apple user security. So anyway, great stuff. Really, really appreciate you coming on and telling us about that. Let's go on to the next thing that people are complaining about besides Apple and iCloud, which is Twitter. Two chunks of unpopular Twitter news hit yesterday. The Wall Street Journal reported that Twitter is planning to roll out a Facebook-like algorithm-controlled form of feed censorship, with software deciding which of your Twitter friends' tweets you'll see and which ones you won't see. And the second is that image-sharing site TwitPic is shutting down after legal pressure from Twitter over TwitPic's application for a trademark. Brian Fung is a tech reporter for The Washington Post and wrote about user unhappiness over both these events. Welcome to you, Brian Fung. And you're awfully quiet. I can't hear Brian.
Yeah, so muted.
How about
sorry,
now,
guys.
Brian? Okay,
there we go.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So, Brian, most people don't like Facebook's and Google Plus's algorithmic filtering of social streams. Twitter was kind of like the last bastion of user control over what you see, at least among the major social networks. Why would Twitter walk away from such a huge differentiator?
Well, Twitter is working very hard to try and develop a large user base. And in order to do that, it needs to reach new audiences and pull in new revenue. One of the ways that it can start doing that is by trying to increase its appeal, surfacing content that's more relevant to users, or what it thinks is more relevant to users. Unfortunately, as we've seen, a lot of existing users on Twitter don't like that idea so much.
So Twitter users are going to kind of complain about everything. I mean, that's kind of how we are. You know, many of us who've been on the service, especially, like 7, some even 8 years, are going to complain. But this particular case, this has been kind of a fundamental part of Twitter, right? It's always a real-time stream. Do we have any idea about what, the future Twitter will look like in terms of how it will surface this relevant content and how that will be shown to users so they know, what the newest thing is and what something that might just be relevant but maybe happened a few hours ago is?
Right. So one of the things, and Twitter has not been very specific about this particular plan yet, but one thing that is being considered apparently is the idea of turning what is currently a reverse chronological feed into a feed that will put what Twitter deems to be interesting content up at the top of the feed. So no longer would it be an unfiltered, what some critics are calling it an unfiltered feed, but you would see some amount of Twitter's sort of intervention there, telling you, hey, this might be something that you're interested in. That also follows in the footsteps of other actions that Twitter has taken to move down this road, such as bringing in tweets from people you don't follow, or for example, introducing favorited tweets from other people.
Personally, I think it's a disaster. I mean, I use Twitter. I use mostly Google+, but I use Twitter as an incoming feed. I follow certain journalists. I follow certain publications. I've carefully curated my list of people that I follow for years, since like 2008. And it's exactly what I want. I've been tweaking it almost every day for all these years. And if Twitter changes that and gives me no other option than to get what they think are the most important stories and burying some other stories, I'm done. I'm going to close my account. That's ridiculous. It's like it would make Twitter completely useless for me. And I think a lot of people feel that way as well. What were some of the prominent people actually saying about this change?
Well, Matthew Ingram from GigaOM was suggesting that if this change goes through and users have no way to opt out of it, that would fundamentally change what Twitter is about. As you say, a lot of power users use Twitter as a way to get news, and if Twitter winds up acting as an editor, so to speak, then the feeds that are coming into journalists' computers or to people who follow journalists like yourself, would potentially be not as robust as before. It's an open question as to how Twitter would actually implement such a feature. You can imagine that Twitter would apply the filtered feed to the web version of Twitter, but leave other platforms like TweetDeck untouched. You could also imagine that you could have both systems set up at the same time. And you could choose, you might be able to toggle the settings one way or the other. So there are a lot of ways that this could actually wind up playing out. So I wouldn't necessarily jump to any conclusions yet as to what this means for the future of the service.
I feel somewhat burned by Facebook and Google, who have refused to have an option of, well, I guess to a certain extent, Facebook has the option if you're really diligent, if you're Robert Scoble about it, and you go in there and really spend, as he says, thousands of hours tweaking your Facebook feed. You can get it pretty much just like you like. But on Google+, they have the options of having more or less of the posts in your feed, but not all. So you have circles on Google+. For example, I have a family circle that's just my wife and my 2 sons, and I can't put all on there. So even if they show me every single post that my family posts, I still in the back of my mind think, are they hiding posts from my children? I mean, and on what basis? It's just
right. Is there something that's missing? I
want some certainty. So Twitter, if you're listening, give us an option to just turn it all on and keep it the way it is, and all is forgiven. I don't care what you do in terms of defaults or whatever. Just make sure it's possible to have an unfiltered post. Now, Brian, let's talk about the TwitPic scenario. Now, Twitter is not asking TwitPic to change their name. They're just saying you can use the name, just don't trademark it. Is that correct?
That's right. What Twitter's argument here is essentially that TwitPic has used a name that is somewhat connected to the Twitter brand, and as a way of defending that brand on sort of legal grounds, Twitter is saying that TwitPic shouldn't be allowed to trademark its name, and as a result, TwitPic has said, okay, that's it. We're going to shut down now.
So this seems kind of convenient. I mean, I hate to automatically take the position of somebody who's reading tea leaves or whatever, or being cynical. But this seems kind of convenient. They're asked to either change their name or not trademark the name, and they say, nope, not going to happen. Sorry, guys, we're shutting down on the 25th. I haven't really even seen a lot of people using TwitPic in years. I guess probably the last time it was used heavily was before Twitter introduced their own image hosting service. Do we have any sense about what maybe the health of the business health of TwitPic was, and maybe if this is just a convenient way for them to, get out of town and blame someone else?
That's a really great question. I unfortunately don't have the answer to that. But that is a good point that, it's at this point, ever since Twitter introduced its own Twitter sharing service, photo sharing service, that other third-party services have been sort of pushed to the wayside. You could say that this is, TwitPic shutting down. This is sort of a convenient excuse for them, but it's also happening in the broader context of Twitter trying to create a more unified experience, particularly among these multimedia-rich services. So, a few years back, Twitter bought up TweetDeck. It's bought up a bunch of other third-party Twitter clients. It's very clearly interested in creating some kind of more bounded experience especially for new users who are trying to figure out their way on the service. So it's important to sort of take the TwitPic shutting down in the broader context of this sort of evolving business relationship.
Yeah, it's just another sign not to get into the business of creating ancillary services for Twitter unless you have a very, very clear value proposition, because it's very likely that Twitter will want to enter into that business themselves and probably try to push you out, right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, either way, I think that Twitter needs to be a lot more lenient. It's possible to be lenient, even though they'll throw around the legal mumbo-jumbo that they have to defend their trademark and so on. I mean, if Leo would have sued Twitter in the early days for using something that was like Twit, then Twitter would not be called Twitter. They'd be called something else. But he chose not to and just let it slide. It can be done, I tell you. Brian Fung writes at thewashingtonpost.com, and you can follow him on Twitter if you still want to, at @B_Fung. Thank you so much for joining us again, Brian Fung.
Thanks again.
All right. Well, TNT fan Paul Franz wrote us an email about our coverage yesterday of the Dyson 360i robot vacuum cleaner, and he wrote, quote, "One of the added capabilities is that I could see added to the Dyson robot is the ability to act as a guard dog." I love this idea. That is, roaming around the room and looking for things that were not there during the last scan, and then you could get a notification that somebody or something is in the house. Sounds like a good plot for a scary movie, but that's a great idea. I mean, this thing has a camera on it, and it's memorizing what is in the room and where things are. Why not? What do you think about this, Christina Warren?
Oh, that's genius. That's genius. It's kind of like take drop cam, marry it with the vacuum cleaner, have it connected to a web interface so that you get an alert, but then you can also see a photo of what was taken, and you can be like, oh my God, unicorns have flown into the room or something, and take action.
Yeah,
like
they should have a special unicorn alert, and of course it's a 360-degree camera. It's not like it's pointed in one direction, so the cat burglar can't like be behind the camera and like no matter where it looks, there's no place to hide from this thing. So why not? That's a great idea, and they should at the very least open it up with an SDK and let third parties build something like that. I think that'd be really cool. So Dyson, if you're watching, you're probably not because you just had a big announcement, but get on it. Guard dog, great idea. Well, in a follow-up, Getty is suing Microsoft. The conflict centers around a new Microsoft product called the Bing Image Widget that allows web publishers to embed digital photographs on their sites while still retaining Microsoft ownership and branding on the image. Getty says the product is an infringement because it's just like the Getty product we told you about in early March. In other news, I don't know how the Austrian crystal maker Swarovski did it, but somehow they convinced two major Korean consumer electronics companies to sprinkle bling all over their devices. We learned Tuesday that Samsung plans a Swarovski-covered Samsung Galaxy Note 4 and also a Gear S smartwatch with Swarovski crystals all over the wristband. Now LG is planning a limited edition 55-inch TV with a stand covered with, you guessed it, Swarovski crystals. The TV will cost more than $5,000. You want crystals on your TV, Christina Warren? What do you think?
No. No, I don't want crystals on my TV. I just want a really nice, like 4K, AMOLED screen. But hey, I mean, if you've got to be tacky, let's just be as tacky as possible and make all of our electronics just completely covered.
That's a great idea. Well, it could all match. All your electronics could have crystals on it. If you're a crystally, sparkly kind of person, I guess that makes sense, kind of.
We're Kardashianifying everything. Like, everything's becoming Kardashianified. It's yeah.
You just coined a great new word that is the word of our age, of our era, Kardashianified. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Ken McDowell in North Carolina, USA, who posted this picture on Twitter and says he watches Tech News Today on the go, clearly on a mobile phone. There you are, Christina Warren, on his mobile phone. How do you watch or listen to TNT? Just take a picture of your setup, post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowDoYouWatchTNT, and we'll find it, and maybe we'll put it on the show. You can also search for the hashtag HowDoYouWatchTNT to see them all for yourself. And that is the tech news today. Thank you so much, Christina Warren. What do you got working? What are you cooking now? Are you planning another big hack?
I'm going to stay away from some hacks for now, I think. But just, getting ready for all the Big Apple stuff next week, and just kind of, cleaning up some, final highlights from IFA, which is still going on. But I mean, I think basically from about this time now forward through next week, it's all Apple all the time. So working on a big kind of rumor roundup with a kind of rating the rumors by accuracy about how likely we might think various things are. So.
Fantastic. And you can follow Christina Warren at film_girl on Twitter. All right, well, thank you so much. Well, you can subscribe to Tech News Today on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Feedly, Yahoo, RSS, and other options. Just choose your favorite at twit.tv/TNT. Follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV, and join our Google Plus community. Just search on Google Plus for Tech News Today, and please send us your thoughts and opinions. Our email address is tnt@twit.tv, and our phone number is 260-TNT-SHOW. Call us and leave a message. Don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. My name's Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you Monday. There it is.